Caution. The following story contains disturbing content and is not suitable for children. The Masked Stranger. In the sleepy town of Harrow Hill, life seemed idyllic and peaceful, but beneath the surface, a terrifying presence lurked in the shadows. This is the story of a masked stranger who turned the town's tranquility into a nightmare. Welcome to The Masked Stranger. Harrow Hill was a picturesque town where everyone knew each other, and nothing ever seemed to go wrong. That was until the day a stranger arrived. He was a tall man, always seen wearing a mask that covered his entire face. His eyes were hidden behind dark lenses, and his voice was rarely heard. He moved into an old, dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. The house had been abandoned for years, its windows boarded up, and its yard overgrown. The townspeople were curious but cautious. They had no reason to suspect the true nature of their new neighbor, but a sense of unease settled over Harrow Hill. Life continued as usual until the day young Emily Parker went missing. She was last seen walking home from school, her route taking her past the old house. When she didn't come home, her parents panicked and called the police. A search party was quickly organized, scouring the town and surrounding woods. But there was no trace of Emily. The disappearance shook the town to its core. Children were kept indoors, and parents grew increasingly anxious. The police questioned everyone, including the new arrival. The masked man claimed to know nothing about Emily, his cold, detached demeanor unsettling the officers. With no evidence linking him to the disappearance, they had no choice but to let him go. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's disappearance remained a mystery. One night, a local woman named Margaret Simmons had a terrifying encounter. She was walking her dog near the old house when she saw the masked man standing at the edge of his property watching her. His presence was menacing, and she hurried home, her heart pounding. The next day, Margaret found a note slipped under her door. It read, "Stay away from the house or you'll be next." She went to the police, but they dismissed it as a prank. Margaret knew better. She began to keep a close eye on the house, noting the comings and goings of the masked man. Margaret's vigilance paid off when she noticed the man leaving the house late at night, carrying a large, heavy bag. She followed him at a distance, her curiosity overcoming her fear. He led her to a remote area in the woods where she saw him burying the bag. As he left, Margaret crept closer and began to dig. What she found inside the bag made her stomach churn. It was filled with blood-stained clothes and personal belongings, Emily's belongings. Horrified, Margaret rushed back to town to inform the police. This time they took her seriously and launched an investigation. The police set up surveillance around the old house, watching the masked man's every move. They knew they needed concrete evidence to make an arrest. Weeks passed, and the man continued his eerie routines, seemingly unaware of the eyes on him. Then, another child went missing. 9-year-old Tommy Miller vanished while playing in his backyard. The town was in a state of panic, and the police knew they had to act fast. They decided to set a trap, hoping to catch the masked man in the act. Undercover officers posed as potential victims, loitering near the old house at night. Their plan paid off when the masked man approached one of them, attempting to lure him away. The officers sprang into action, surrounding him and wrestling him to the ground. As they removed his mask, they were shocked to find a face they recognized, Dr. Charles Morgan, a respected local doctor. The revelation stunned the town. How could a man who had dedicated his life to saving others be capable of such horrific acts? Dr. Morgan was taken into custody and subjected to intense interrogation. He remained silent, his eyes cold and unfeeling. The police searched his house and found a hidden room in the basement. It was filled with macabre trophies, photographs, locks of hair, and personal items from his victims. The evidence was overwhelming, but Dr. Morgan refused to explain his actions. The police could only speculate about his motives, wondering if he had been driven by some dark, twisted compulsion. The trial of Dr. Charles Morgan was the most sensational event in Harrow Hill's history. The courtroom was packed with townspeople, eager for answers and justice. The prosecution laid out the gruesome details of his crimes, painting a picture of a man who had hidden his true nature behind a mask of respectability. Despite the mountain of evidence against him, Dr. Morgan remained emotionless throughout the trial. He showed no remorse, no guilt. His defense tried to argue insanity, but the jury was unconvinced. They found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. With Dr. Morgan behind bars, the town of Harrow Hill tried to move on, but the scars left by his actions ran deep. Parents remained fearful, and children grew up hearing the chilling story of the masked doctor who had preyed on their community. Margaret Simmons, hailed as a hero for her role in uncovering the truth, struggled with the trauma of her discovery. She left Harrow Hill, unable to shake the memories of what she had seen. The old house was demolished, a small comfort to those who had lost loved ones. Years passed, and the story of Dr. Charles Morgan became part of Harrow Hill's dark folklore. The town never truly recovered from the horrors inflicted by the masked stranger. Every year, on the anniversary of Emily Parker's disappearance, a vigil was held to honor the victims and remind the community of the evil that had once walked among them. In his prison cell, Dr. Morgan remained a figure of fear and fascination. He never spoke of his crimes, his silence adding to the mystery of his twisted mind. And though he was locked away, the memory of his mask and the terror he had caused continued to haunt the people of Harrow Hill. Margaret's departure from Harrow Hill did little to ease her troubled mind. She moved to a nearby city hoping to start anew, but the haunting memories of the masked stranger followed her. She often woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing his chilling voice whispering threats in her dreams. One day, Margaret received a package with no return address. Inside was a worn, leather-bound journal. It belonged to Dr. Morgan. She hesitated, debating whether to read it, but curiosity got the better of her. As she flipped through the pages, she uncovered the dark thoughts and motivations of a disturbed mind. Dr. Morgan's journal detailed his transformation from a dedicated doctor to a remorseless killer. He wrote about his fascination with life and death, his belief that he was chosen to test the limits of human fear. He described his victims in chilling detail, revealing a twisted pleasure in their terror. Margaret took the journal to the police, but the case against Dr. Morgan was already closed. The journal provided no new evidence, but it did offer closure to the families of the victims. They learned the truth about what had happened to their loved ones, even if it was a truth too horrifying to fully comprehend. In the town of Harrow Hill, life continued, but the shadow of the masked stranger lingered. The children who had grown up during the time of his reign of terror were now adults, still carrying the scars of those dark days. They told their children the story of Dr. Morgan as a warning, a reminder that evil could hide behind the most benign of masks. One cold, stormy night, the power went out in Harrow Hill. The town was plunged into darkness, and the old fears resurfaced. In the pitch black, residents huddled in their homes, hearing noises that weren't there, seeing shadows move where they shouldn't. It was as if the masked stranger's spirit had returned to remind them of his presence. When the lights came back on, everything seemed normal. But on the outskirts of town, near the site of the demolished house, a new structure had appeared overnight. It was a small shed, seemingly innocuous. The townspeople were wary, but curiosity drew them closer. Inside the shed, they found a mask identical to the one Dr. Morgan had worn, along with a note: "The collector's work is never done." The discovery sent shockwaves through Harrow Hill. Who had placed the mask there? Was it a prank, or was there a new threat? The police increased patrols, and the town once again lived in fear, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sheriff Daniels, who had taken over after the previous sheriff retired, took the note and mask seriously. He launched a discreet investigation, trying to trace the origins of the mask and the note. His team combed through surveillance footage and interviewed residents, but found no leads. As months passed without incident, the tension in Harrow Hill began to ease. but the memory of the masked stranger and the new mask in the shed lingered. It served as a grim reminder that while they had caught one monster, others might still be lurking in the shadows. The town of Harrow Hill would never forget the masked stranger who brought fear and death to their once peaceful community. Dr. Charles Morgan's crimes left a permanent mark on the town, a haunting reminder that evil can hide behind the most unsuspecting faces. Though Morgan was behind bars, the legacy of his terror lived on. The appearance of the mask and note in the shed suggested that perhaps the collector's work was not done. The fear that had once gripped Harrow Hill resurfaced, a chilling reminder that darkness can linger in the most unexpected places. Sheriff Daniels vowed to protect the town, to ensure that no new terror would rise from the shadows. But the mystery of the mask remained unsolved, a sinister puzzle that hinted at more horrors to come. Thank you for joining us for this chilling tale. If you enjoyed The Masked Stranger, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who walk among us.